So now we are on to company number 2 this evening. And I am excited to introduce Dr. Parag God, who is the co-founder and CEO of a company called SpineX. And Parag, I would just make sure you unmute and then you're ready to go.
All right, can you guys see the slides okay? Okay. All right, thank you, Katie and Mike, for having me on this platform. It's nice to present to you all. My name is Parag God. I'm the co-founder and CEO of SpineX. The problem we're solving is one that a lot of individuals take for granted until it is an issue that you face yourself. Yes, we're talking about urinary incontinence. Urinary incontinence impacts about 1 in 3 women and about 1 in 14 men, with the rate of incidence increasing with age, totaling about 33 million individuals. In addition, there's a whole group of individuals suffering from a condition called neurogenic bladder. These are ones that suffer from paralysis of some sort, spinal cord injury, stroke, totaling about 40 million in America suffering from overactive bladder. In Europe, the total is about 25 million, world over about 550 million. Now, the American Urological Association recommends a 4-pronged approach to treat urinary incontinence, beginning with behavioral therapies, followed by medications, invasive and non-invasive neuromodulation, and finally augmentation surgery. Each of these comes with an increasing level of costs and risks associated with it. However, they also come with multiple limitations. Medications, for example, has significant side effects, one of them being dry mouth. To resolve dry mouth, you got to drink more water. You drink more water, you are going to leak more often. And because of which about 80% of the individuals actually discontinue medications after trying it. Posterior tibial nerve stimulation, or PTNS, a popular third-level neuromodulation therapy done in the clinic, has only about 50% of the people that actually respond to it. In addition, it is not approved for neurogenic cases, and it does not lead to any changes in sensation or bladder capacity. Botox, on the other hand, is effective, but it leads to increased risks of retention and urinary tract infections. So none of them are actually solving the problem. They're just managing symptoms. Introducing SCONE, spinal cord neuromodulator, the first of its kind, wearable, portable, non-invasive electrical stimulator that can reactivate and retrain the spinal circuits that control bladder function. We've taken a complicated problem of interacting waveforms and built it into a sophisticated wearable device to treat an important problem. By placing these little hydrogel electrodes along specific levels along the back, we send in low intensity electrical pulses. These electrical pulses retrain the circuits that contain the intrinsic control for bladder and sphincter function. Now, by sending in these pulses, we reduce the spasticity in the bladder, increase the tone in the sphincter, and it acts as a hearing aid by allowing the brain or the cortex to increase the sensory signal of bladder fullness. Third, by activating the lumbosacral spinal networks that control bladder function leads to neuroplasticity, thereby reducing incontinence and increasing bladder capacity while improving sensation. Therapy sessions are absolutely painless, last for about an hour a day, 2 to 4 days a week, over a period of 12 weeks. Patients start to respond by session 6 and continue to improve over the course of the 12 weeks. Now, how is it that we are actually able to stimulate the spinal cord without causing any pain or discomfort? That's because of these interacting waveforms with a high frequency that creates an analgesic effect on the skin, and a second frequency that actually penetrates and activates the spinal cord. As you can see from the traces from urodynamic catheters placed in the bladder and sphincter, the stimulation can actually result in contractions in the bladder and sphincter. Now, when delivered, we're able to fine-tune the activation specifically to the bladder and the sphincter based on the site and intensity of stimulation. Now, when delivered chronically over a period of weeks, we're able to change the plasticity in the spinal and brain networks, resulting in modifications in the urodynamic cycles. As you can see from the trace on the right, the bladder capacity increases, the level of control increases, as well as the overall flow is more efficient with a higher voiding efficiency. What's important to note here is that both of these traces were in the absence of stimulation, suggesting that an actual neuroplasticity is being induced in the spinal and brain networks. What's also important to note here is that we're able to sustain the level of function over an extended period of time, weeks after therapy has stopped. In a previous clinical study published last year, we were able to demonstrate an 11-point change in the neurogenic bladder symptom score in patients with spinal cord injury, stroke, or MS and overactive bladder. Now, this translated to a 70% reduction in incontinence episodes. The neurogenic bladder symptom score is a metric of overall bladder health. In an ongoing study in patients with overactive bladder that were on medication, we had them been off medication, and after delivering therapy for 12 weeks, we were able to observe a 15-point change in the neurogenic bladder symptom score, which translated to an 80% reduction in incontinence and a 4 times increase in zero urge voids. Now, so the patients can actually enjoy all the benefits of improved function without any of the side effects of the medication. We've been active since 2019, where we raised a small friends and family round that allowed us to complete product development of our Alpha device, initiate feasibility studies in the overactive bladder field. Since then, we've been able to receive grants to the order of about $2.5 million from NIH, as well as through other foundations, that has allowed us to complete development of our clinical MVP device, as well as begin our validation study later this year that will lead to our 510K by early 2023. So we have been able to run a really lean machine with zero venture funding so far. The second phase of our development would be a 510K, where the therapy can then be delivered in the home environment and patients wouldn't have to come into the clinic. IP was filed in early 2019, and this covers the novel waveforms that allow us to activate the spinal cord without causing any pain or discomfort to the patients. We expect to file additional IP later this year and early next year. We should cover generation 2 and 3 of our device, including a closed loop system for optimization of the stimulation. But we're not an overactive bladder company. We are a spinal neuromodulation company. SCONE is a platform technology that can be used for multiple indications. And we already have critical data from multiple indications, beginning with cerebral palsy and the impact that it can have on the children with CP. We have a small but highly motivated team led by Dr. Reggie Edgerton, who's considered as the father of spinal neuromodulation and has been working at UCLA for over 50 years. Dr. Evgeny Craden, a trained neurourologist leading our clinical efforts. Mr. Tim Hopper, a medical device executive with over 25 years of experience, and myself as co-founding CEO and someone who's translated the technology all the way from rodents now to humans. And with that, I thank you for your time and happy to answer any questions.
Parag, thank you for being here tonight and telling us all about this technology. You know, I'm a pediatrician, and so we don't deal with a lot of neurogenic bladder. But what I would say is this seems like a game changer, and super exciting for a lot of patients that deal with this type of issue. So one question from my perspective, because again, in my mind, I think, wow, I mean, we're talking, sounds like neuroplasticity, brain, spinal cord, all of these things which we know exist, and yet it's still hard to believe. So tell us a little bit more about the neurophysiology of the technology, like how and why does this work? Because again, seems like a game changer.
The basic principle behind this is that the spinal cord is smart. We give a lot of importance to the brain and assume that the brain is controlling every aspect of our life. There's a key term that we use in neurophysiology called automaticity. Everything we do is automatic, including bladder function, where bladder is controlled by the spinal cord to a large extent. Imagine a 1-year-old who's got a healthy bladder and bowel function, and they hold empty on based on when it reaches the fullness. In the case of an adult, you empty it volitionally only when it is socially acceptable. So that's the basic concept here that we are tapping into. Now, after a dysfunction such as a stroke or spinal cord injury, or even after OAB, the circuitry in the spinal cord is dormant or is not dead. We have identified ways in which we can reactivate these circuits by placing these electrodes along the spinal cord and not cause any pain or discomfort to the individuals. That's the basic underlying principle that we are capitalizing on.
Great. Again, a little bit mind-blowing. A couple of questions from our audience related to your clinical data. And I think this is great. So One of them really is about the durability of your outcomes. So talk a little bit about one, it seems like small patient sizes, and talk about how long you've followed them and what you anticipate needing for your FDA clearance in the future.
Sure. So yeah, these are first in human studies that we've conducted so far. We've tested this in about 20 odd patients, but the results are durable with over 90% of patients responding positively. But yeah, in addition, the response rate is high, as well as the level of response is better than what's been seen in the current clinically approved devices. In terms of durability, we've trained patients over a period of about 3 months or 12 weeks. And after stopping the therapy, patients are able to sustain it for at least 3 months after it's stopped. So we know the therapy is durable. We anticipate future studies where we'll explore the use of a maintenance therapy, similar to what PTNS currently does, where patients may receive therapy once a month or twice a month just to maintain that level of functioning.
All right, fantastic. So a couple of questions about how does this technology actually differ from sacral stimulation, except for the fact that it's or interstim devices, except for the fact that this is non-invasive. So talk a little bit about that.
The key difference between our approach and sacral neuromodulation lies on two fronts. The first, apart from it being non-invasive, we are able to activate the spinal cord directly. Sacral neuromodulation stimulates the S2, S3 nerves, or the nerve roots rather, and those then has some ascending and descending control that reaches the bladder. In our approach, by activating the spinal cords directly, those are the neural networks that control bladder and sphincter function that we're able to reactivate. That's the first key difference. The second is because of the ability to activate the spinal cord directly, we're able to induce neuroplasticity in the brain and the spinal cord, and that leads to long-term changes that can be seen even when the stimulation is turned off.
Wow. We have some very positive comments from our audience about, again, the potential of this technology. A couple of additional questions on potential side effects and or safety experience around this type of treatment.
So we've had this technology tested in clinical studies at UCLA and other universities now, and we've experienced over 200 patients for different studies, not just bladder function, and seen absolutely no adverse events. The only side effect that we've seen is a little bit of redness around the skin, and that's similar to any FPS or TENS unit that you would use otherwise for pain relief, and that redness goes away in about half an hour or so.
Great. So a couple of other questions. Talk a little bit more about your IP, and then are there other competitors that are using this approach of spinal neuromodulation?
Sure. The IP that we have essentially covers our novel waveforms that we use to reactivate the spinal circuits without causing the pain or discomfort I talked about. It covers the ability to activate the brain and spinal cord to specifically target the bladder and sphincter. It covers smart wearable devices so that we can integrate the device and the electrodes into a chair, integrate it into a shirt, and integrate it into a wearable device so that we can make it easy for patients to use. There are competitors in the field that target overactive bladder. There's Blue Wind, there's Valencia Technologies that does peripheral stimulation of tibial nerve, either implantable or semi-implantable. No one's doing this on the spinal cord front. So that gives us first mover advantage. In addition, everyone's focusing primarily on the overactive bladder market and not so much in the neurogenic population. So that's where our current focus is. So that gives us again a first market advantage by really carving out a niche for ourselves in the neurogenic population.
Fantastic. And one last question I just have to ask, because it seems to me that there are other indications, again, for this type of technology. So can you tell us a little bit more about thoughts that you have around that and maybe potential studies that have been done already?
Sure. So we're leveraging the spinal cord and the smartness in the spinal cord, and we believe that the same can be used to treat cerebral palsy as well as improvement in function in patients that are paralyzed. So I'll briefly touch upon cerebral palsy, where physical therapy is considered as the gold standard for treatment. Now, here's a kid that's considered a level 4 on the GMFM scale, trying to walk on a treadmill after having received extensive physical therapy for over 6 months. And you can see he is unable to do so. Now, on the same day, we introduced SCONE over the lumbosacral spinal cord with the same device. And you can see the difference on the right when SCONE is on versus on the left when he's attempting to walk without the stimulation. Now, the most important thing for me here is the smile on the kid's face, being able to actually walk and just be a 2-year-old. Now, similar to incontinence, level of neuropathy when you train, with physical therapy. Now, here's a kid again on a level 4 at home without stimulation, attempting to walk in his walker on the left versus 8 weeks later. So just 8 weeks of therapy or 16 hours of therapy on the right, successfully walking around at home with his walker. So this is it's not a magic potion. It's not making them perfect, but the level of independence that can be restored is huge.
That is incredible. Again, Parag, thank you for being here tonight and sharing with us all about SpineX and this technology. I have high hopes, and I love that you're also helping kids with cerebral palsy. That's super exciting.